It began in the early 1970s, a time of charm, trust, and innocence across America. No one could have imagined that one of the most notorious figures in criminal history was blending seamlessly into everyday life. His name was Ted Bundy, and on the surface, he was everything society admired. Intelligent, polite, well-dressed, and ambitious. He was the kind of man you wouldn't think twice about helping or smiling back at. He studied psychology, volunteered on political campaigns, and even worked at a crisis hotline center. Ironically, the man who once helped others in distress was the same man who would later send fear through the hearts of millions. Those who knew him described him as confident, articulate, and magnetic. His friends couldn't believe the stories that later surfaced, that beneath his calm, friendly demeanor was a cold, calculating mind that could deceive anyone. Investigators would later call him a master of disguise, someone who could change not just his appearance, but his personality depending on who he was talking to. He could be a charming student, a loving boyfriend, a helpful stranger, or something much darker. At the time, the U.S. was changing. The idea of a serial predator moving from state to state was something law enforcement hadn't yet learned to handle. Local police departments didn't have centralized databases or cross-state communication. That gap allowed one man to hide in plain sight, moving freely, blending in and staying ahead of the law. When reports of missing women began to surface, each incident seemed isolated, random. There was no connection yet, no pattern, at least not one the authorities could see. Witnesses describe a man named Ted, polite and soft-spoken, sometimes with his arm in a sling or leg in a cast, asking for help. And every time, people would stop to help him, because he didn't look like danger. He looked like someone's neighbor, someone's friend. Years later, criminologists would call Ted Bundy a chameleon, not because he hid in shadows, but because he could become whoever you wanted him to be. Behind that carefully constructed mask was a man who studied people as if they were puzzles, learning what made them trust, what made them hesitate, and what made them completely unaware of the danger right in front of them. The killer of 1,000 faces wasn't just a man of many disguises. He was a mirror reflecting what society wanted to see, and that's what made him so terrifying. By the mid-1970s, fear had replaced the sense of safety that once defined America's college towns. Across Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado, women were disappearing under mysterious, eerily similar circumstances. Local authorities were overwhelmed, each handling their own cases, unaware that they were all chasing the same man. The first real break came from survivors, young women who managed to escape encounters with a polite, handsome man who introduced himself simply as Ted. He often pretended to be injured, wearing a fake cast or sling, asking for help carrying books or loading something into his car. It was a performance, carefully rehearsed and frighteningly effective. When law enforcement compared descriptions from multiple witnesses, a pattern began to emerge. Same name, same approach, same Volkswagen Beetle. But at that time, Ted Bundy was the last person anyone would suspect. He was a law student with a bright future, even described as clean-cut and trustworthy. He attended political gatherings, knew judges, and worked within the system designed to catch people like him. Detectives struggled to convince others that someone so polished could be behind something so sinister. Without today's technology, no DNA databases, no cell phone tracking, every piece of evidence had to be connected by intuition and persistence. A photo lineup was organized, and for the first time, one of the survivors pointed directly at Bundy's face. Still, it wasn't enough. The evidence was circumstantial, a web of testimony, sightings, and fragments that couldn't yet prove guilt beyond doubt. Yet the police knew. The public, however, remained divided. Many refused to believe that this charming, soft-spoken man could be capable of such manipulation. In 1975, Ted Bundy was finally arrested, not for what everyone suspected, but for a routine traffic stop in Utah. Inside his car, police found what they would later call a kit of deception: handcuffs, rope, a crowbar, and other items that hinted at a dark double life. The discovery shocked even the officers who made the arrest. They had caught a man who smiled at them like an old friend while they read him his rights. The investigation soon spread across states, uncovering connections that linked Bundy to crimes in multiple jurisdictions. Detectives from Washington, Utah, and Colorado began to piece together the map of his movements, a trail that showed just how organized and deliberate he had been. He wasn't acting out of impulse. He was planning every detail. Meanwhile, the media descended on the case. America was fascinated and horrified at the same time. News anchors described Bundy as intelligent, articulate, and handsome, while psychologists called him a new kind of predator, one who didn't need to hide in the dark because he could walk freely in the light. But even behind bars, Ted Bundy remained unpredictable. He studied his interrogators, smiled at the cameras, and seemed almost to enjoy the attention. What no one knew yet was that his story was far from over, and soon the world would witness his most shocking escape, one that would make headlines around the world. By 1977, Ted Bundy had become a name whispered in fear across America. His face was now on front pages, his name linked to disappearances stretching across multiple states. Yet behind bars, he seemed calm, even confident. To many, it was as if being captured was just another game to him. During his trial, Bundy made the unusual choice to represent himself in court. He stood before the judge not as a defendant, but as his own attorney, polite, articulate, even charming. Cameras captured every moment, and the public was stunned by how composed he seemed. He smiled at reporters, took notes, and spoke with the confidence of a seasoned lawyer. But behind that calm exterior, Bundy was planning something far more audacious. During one court session in Aspen, Colorado, he was given access to the law library to prepare his case. The guards watched him casually as he flipped through legal books, but what they didn't notice was how often he looked at the second-story window. When no one was watching, Ted Bundy jumped. He leaped from the courthouse window and vanished into the Colorado wilderness. For 6 days, he was gone, surviving on stolen food, sleeping in the woods, and blending in with hikers and travelers. When he was finally caught again, thinner but still smiling, the world couldn't believe it. How could someone under constant watch simply walk away from justice? But that wasn't the end. Months later, he escaped again, this time from a jail cell in Glenwood Springs. He had starved himself to fit through a small hole he'd carved into the ceiling of his cell, crawling through the ductwork until he reached the jailer's apartment and simply walked out the front door wearing stolen clothes. It was one of the most shocking escapes in American history. And while police scrambled to catch him, Bundy traveled east, eventually resurfacing in Florida under a new name. For weeks, he lived quietly among unsuspecting college students, blending into normal life once more. But his freedom wouldn't last. In February 1978, he was arrested again, tired, disheveled, and without his trademark composure. This time, there would be no more escapes. In the years that followed, Ted Bundy became the subject of countless psychological studies, interviews, and documentaries. Experts called him the face of manipulation, a man who wore many masks, who could convince the world he was harmless even when the truth was far darker. When he finally faced judgment, Bundy looked at the cameras one last time and said words that still haunt investigators. "I'm the most cold-hearted son of a gun you'll ever meet." Even decades later, his story remains one of the most chilling reminders of how evil can hide behind a smile and how danger can wear the most ordinary face.